Hi, today I'd like to show you a book I got as a pile that I got at an auction. It wasn't a particular book that I was actually going for, but there was other books I wanted, and this came with it. Well, there was two of these. There were two big volumes of this Mrs. Beeton's book of household management. Now, this is a very famous book. Well, it used to be in the past. I don't know if many of my children didn't know anything about Mrs. Beeton, but I would have known in my day, because nowadays you've got people like Nigella Lawson and Delia Smith, and I'm sure in other countries you've got other famous people who do things on YouTube or on TV. But before TV and that, this would have been the major work, especially in Victorian period and Edwardian period, that you'd have gone to for your recipes and to look at how to manage a household. So this book was more for those who had a household, which meant you had a cook, you had servants, you had cleaners. So it was like the middling and upper classes would have used this book. Now, Mrs. Beeton, she died very young. She died when she was, I think, 28. And she produced this book when she was only 21 in 1861. So she had a very short life, only 28 years. She produced 4 children during that period. Now, she was a very famous, this was produced in 1861 after a period of having, like a lot of things, like Dickens, he produced most of his work in weekly pamphlets, and then after that he brought all it in together to become one big book. Same with this, it was produced in small editions, and then eventually it was all brought back into one big book in 1861. And 2 million copies were sold in the year, and it has been in print ever since. Now, when you think that the population of Britain at that time was very low, maybe 20 million, something like that. So even 2 million, 10% of the population had this book, that would have been something. So this is not an original. The original would have been, cost me a few £1,000s. This is a 1907 edition. Now, they were produced, as I say, right up to the modern day. So it's never been out of print, really. Now, like all heroes and heroines nowadays, you get people who are now digging up the dirt and disparaging everybody. Everybody's got flaws, and even the great heroes that we used to look up to have all been toppled by modern reviewists. Now, Mrs. Beeton has been criticised that a lot of her recipes were just copies of previous books, and so she's been labelled a plagiarist, somebody who's just taken other people's work, chucked it all together, and then published herself. Now, there is some evidence of that. She has been, a number of these were taken from previous publications, some are new stuff, but that's the way the world works. So you've got a nice publication here of 1907. So you've got colour plates, and you've got more plates than you would have got in the original 1861. And also it's expanded quite a bit as well. So this has got over 2,000 pages, I believe. So it goes through things like how to manage your household, and then it goes into things like the actual recipes themselves. So you've got things on here, you've got the mistress, the housekeeper, the cook, the kitchen, the marketing, and then you've got list of plates. And then you've got some adverts as well in here. And you've got Cadbury's there. So this is a 1907, so it would have been just after the death of Victoria. So this is actually an Edwardian copy. And again, in the Victorian and the Edwardian period, they were very elaborate in their serving of dishes. make it as, especially when I'm saying this, I'm not talking about the average Joe who just had mutton stew or some other things chucked in a bowl and ate. This is really just the middling sort and above. So these would have been sort of higher bank managers and above, that sort of elite. So they've got a bit on the mistress, the housewife, home virtues, hospitality, good temper, dress and fashion, engaging domestics, wages of servants, visiting cards, parties. The strength and honour are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She looseth well the ways of her household, and catcheth not the breath of idleness. Her children arise up, and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praiseth her. Proverbs. So it starts with sort of a very godly quotation from the Bible, and this is very much a Victorian thing. The Victorians were into this, especially it was a period of revivalists in the church. The Georgian period was seen as a decadent, loose, immoral era, and the Victorians kicked against it. It's same with Victoria and Albert. Albert grew up with his father and mother not on best terms, having affairs, and so he became quite a prude in his family life. And that came over in this Victorian. But you should also remember that even at the time of Jack the Ripper in the 1890s, in the East End of London, there was about a quarter of the women who were casual prostitutes. So it just shows you this was a veneer on life that just went on as normal. People did what they did, but it was only the middling and upper classes that had this veneer of respectability, and often when you looked at it, you found out there was cracks. But this is the very Victorian idea of a family. And then you've got things like early rising, frugality, a judicious choice of friends. Friendship should not be hastily formed. Hospitality in conversation. So if you want to read these and get some Victorian ideas of how you should live your life, there you have it. So it gives you a very cheerfulness on the important subject of dress and fashion. Then you've got charity is a duty. Again, this thing that if you've got things you have to, it's very Protestant work ethic, very Protestant thing about giving and marketing and getting up, having a very pure life, up and early and then working until the dusk. Engaging servants' character, wages of servants, treatment of servants. And then you've got how much a servant would get. So a groom of the chamber would get something between 45 to 55 pound a year. This is yearly stuff. Under gamesmen would get 50 to 70. Women servants, you see. So a general servant would only get 12 to 28 pounds. So it shows you the very low, but this would be, they would get clothing and all their food. So they would live in and have food and clothing. So this would be sort of on top of that. Number of servants you needed. Daily duties. Before breakfast. after this general supervision. Luncheons, visiting of friendships, morning calls. This is all about this thing that you had certain times when you went to see people. And then you've got calling cards here, how you'd make your calling cards, receiving in the morning. So this book gives you everything to do that you'd have. And this would be set as and then you've got what to do at a ball, an evening party etiquette, arrival of guests, introduction. The lady of the house usually stands at the door of the drawing room to receive her guests. She may introduce some of them to others, where she may imagine mutual acquaintance will be suitable and agreeable. It is very often the practice of the master of the house to introduce one gentleman to another, but occasionally the lady performs this office. So again, it gives you an idea. So if you went into the public foray, you'd know how to act. So you won't be embarrassed. You would say, this is the way people should act. And so it gives you an idea. Nowadays people it's like dancing. In the olden days there would be set dances and people had set steps. Nowadays people just jig about and do whatever they like. And the same thing with acquaintances. In the past there was an etiquette about how you spoke to people. If you didn't know them, then unless you were introduced by somebody who did know them and know you, and then said, this is Mrs. Something and this is Mrs. Something, you'd probably just stand there and look at each other because you couldn't actually formally introduce yourself without knowing. So this is all part of this olden idea of how you react in a society. So then we got some more. There's an old picture of there's a huge book to hold, I tell you. There's an old stove, an old copper stove where you'd do most of your cooking. So you think how difficult it would have been to do your cooking on this, because your temperature might fluctuate. Sometimes it'd be very hot and sometimes it'd be not so hot. It would take hours to prepare the stove, putting the hot coals in. It's like a barbecue. You know, when you do a barbecue, often you have to get everything ready about 2 hours to get the coals ready so that you actually do a barbecue. But same here, you'd have to get your stove and that ready for hours before to make sure it's at the right temperature. Then you've got to cook everything and move it around on the top, because certain parts of the oven might be hot and others a bit cold. So you'd move things around a lot and it'd be very difficult to keep a good temperature. So again, it tells you about the kitchen. There are some pots and pans, and so it was very labour intensive in those days. You couldn't just shove things in the microwave and just come back in a couple of minutes. You got the old weighing scales, the old pots and pans that would have been used. So life was very, very much more difficult in those days. And we're not talking that long ago. We're only talking even sort of 1930s, it was still very difficult. So, you know, we're only talking 100 odd years ago when life was still pretty bad for most people. And here you've got some ingredients, soft soap. Now you've got, I think you can just about see them. So you can see that. There's some black lead. That sounds a bit dangerous nowadays. So you've got all these different things that you could use in your kitchen for cleaning it. Household requisites. Now we've got some things. The top one I think is for cutting. Then you've got a primitive hoover, knife sharpener, a mangle, My mother had a mangle to push. You'd get your damp clothes out of the washing machine, or it was in those days a big tub which you just heated up, and you'd stick it through a mangle to dry as much as possible, and then you'd put it through, hang it on the line outside. So you've got all these bits. There you've got the parts of a cow. Just shows you where all the meat comes from. So it gives you some huge amount of marketing, introduction to cooking, the roasting, how you roast things. And then you've got things like soups. So you've got all these different types of soups. Let's have a look at a couple that might be of interest to people. Hotchpotch. So if you want to make hotchpotch, just have a go there. That's some leek soup. Partridge soup. That would be a very big thing, especially after people have gone for a shoot. A big shoot would have been a big thing. People going out, the men especially, going out shooting a few partridge from the estate they lived on. And then they'll come back and the cook would then have to make a soup out of it. Here we've got oxtail soup. Oxtail used to be quite a cheap thing, but nowadays oxtail from butchers is quite expensive. Cucumber soup, green pea soup, Dutch soup. Then we've got the fish, another nice picture of the fish. And then fish, all the fish dishes here. Let's see if we can find eels. Conger eels were a big thing. There's another nice. Yeah, lots of eels were eaten in the Victorian period. It was much more for fish chowder. There we got fish from tinned salmon, and we're starting to get the tins coming in. Tinned fish and macaroni, fish pies, mullet. Now you got huge amounts of fish. Cooking veal, recipes for cooking veal. Huge amount of veal. Then we've got beef hash. There's a picture of a sheep. There's some very ornate dishes. To give you an idea of the amount of work that had to go into these. They weren't just thrown up quickly. Sheep's heart, cooking for pork cutlets. And a lot of them got French names, because France was the place of so again you got the name of the item, and then you have the French text. Again, all of these got French, because France was supposed to be the place of cookery. Cooking was a big thing in France. And even today, people have always said, oh, you know, France is very good for cooking. So you're getting loads of these. So if anybody wants to have potted hare is not eaten that much nowadays, like rabbit. My dad used to eat rabbit because it was much more of a working class, and also at the time of the Second World War, things like rabbit and hare were eaten a lot more because they're easy to get and cheap. I don't think it went against your ration coupon. So people used to eat rabbit and hare, which they don't so much nowadays, except in more higher stations. So I think sort of gentry and that tend to eat hare and rabbit much more than even the peasants do nowadays. Again, you've got some nice colour illustrations coming through here. And again, on vegetables, you've got these lovely amount of vegetables. How you should display them. You don't chuck them on a plate. You actually make them look appetizing. Now, as I was saying, she only lived a short while. She died when she was 28 after having 4 children. And she produced this book when she was 21. But as all heroes nowadays, she has been tarnished and saying people that this is puddings, raspberry pudding, rhubarb pudding. I think I'll try to make one of these and see how it comes out. Queen of bread puddings. Because a lot of her recipes had been taken from previous cookbooks, she's now got a reputation as being a plagiarist. And that, you know, she wasn't as great as people say she was. She just copied other people's recipes. But I think, like all people, things like bananas and pineapples, you see, would have been quite expensive in those days. They would have been quite a rarity. Like everybody nowadays, there's got this thing that you just trash people for certain things. I'm not sure why. Anybody who's got any reputation nowadays, people are looking to see if they can find some fault in them. And so all our heroes of the past have now become villains. And these are sort of pickles and store stuff that you could get in those period. So I hope this was of interest, and it gives a bit of an insight into Victorian and Edwardian cooking. And if you want to have some more of this, and I can always put a lot more recipes if that is of interest to people. There's an invalid cookery, so how you should prepare your invalids tray when you come to give it to them. And then you've got beef tea and stuff like that for cooking for adolescents. Then you've got buns, biscuits. So you've got everything you could think of here. And as you can see, it goes typical Indian dishes. How you trussing poultry and game. Serviettes, how to fold serviettes. Pages of that. There's loads of different types of how you do serviettes. Look at that. And then you've got a menu making and specimen making. So how you make your menu. And again, it's all about how to present things. So it made it much more. So your menu card and guest cards. Things were much more ornate. Now again, I keep going back to this is not the life of a normal person. This is the upper classes, those with money that they could have. And this has got Bissell's carpet sweeper. It's quite well, look at how she's made up with her gown, and she's got her sweeping her floor in a ball gown, looks like. Not what you do today. And then you've got Fry's, Cocoa. Fry's again, they're still around. Bissell, I think they're still around. I remember Beck's Bissell was a place in my day. Trident ranges, so this is efficient cooking in those days. The Mangle. So quite a few different things. Then think of this one, you've got these irons and things. How you'd have to keep putting your iron on the fire. You'd make sure it didn't burn the clothes. It wasn't too hot to burn the clothes. And then after a couple of strokes, you'd have to put it back on the fire. Life was very, very difficult. And then you've got Chlorodyne. Mangles again. So I hope that was of some interest. I know it was a long one, but I thought it's quite a big book, so it needed a bit of a time to go through it. Okay, please, if you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up. Give it a comment if you want to see some more recipes. I can always show some more recipes. Any recipes you think would be quite good. And give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It does bring this content to other people. Look at my other videos. I do videos on various subjects like coins, history, guns and all sorts of things. So please look at my channel to see if there's anything else that tickles your fancy. Okay, thank you very much, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.